Hi, welcome back to the Gem Hawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day no matter what you're getting up to. Today I want to share with you a chaos wrapping technique. Now this just uses wire, and you can use a heavier gauge such as 1mm, which is 18 gauge, or 1.25mm 16 gauge, which is what I'll be demonstrating with today. That's going to create a lovely sturdy frame to work with. And then your wrapping wire, you can either use a nice light gauge like 0.4mm, which is 26 gauge, which gives you quite a fine look like so. Or you can take that up one layer to 22 gauge, which is 0.6mm. So here's a little star, a little bit thicker wire, makes it a little bit heavier as well. You wouldn't want that in your ear, I guarantee you. And there's a little heart shape as well. So today I'm going to show you how to create the crescent moon shape, and I'm also going to teach you the chaos technique, and you can put that over any shape you like, really. So if you'd like to join me down at the board, I'll show you those a little bit more closely. So here's the heart shape. There's a single piece of wire which starts here, curls all the way around to the top, tiny little loop here, and all the way back round to the bottom, and then just an add-on bail at the top, which I will show you in a future demo, how to change up solid designs that you've created but have no bail. And I'll show you how to add one of those on a little bit later, just to make it wearable instantly, or hangable if you prefer. There is the little star shape that I've created, and this again is in 1.25 16 gauge frame wire, and these two have been wrapped with 22 gauge or 0.6mm gauge filling in wire. And then there's the little crescent moons, and I'm going to show you this shape today. These two were both wrapped with a finer gauge, which was the 26 gauge or 0.4mm gauge. So if I put them side by side, you can see the different looks that you can achieve with those two different fill-in wires. So we're going to start off by despooling and warming some of our heavier gauge. As I say, I'm working with 16 gauge, which is 1.25mm. And today I'll be working with approximately 10 inches or so, and I'm just going to give that a little bit of a warm. To make my life easy, I'm going to grip hold of one end with a pair of good substantial pliers, and I'm just going to warm that between thumb and forefinger, and in this way the wire will behave much more beautifully for us. So to form the crescent, I'm going to use my beadalon bangle form, the round one, not the oval one, and I'm just going to start by creating the outer edge of that crescent shape. So here's one that we're just going to use for reference. Pop the form out of the way, and that's the outer edge, really nicely done already. I just want to size that down slightly. So you could use a smaller form if you wanted to, entirely up to you. So what we need to do is take a little bit from the end, there's probably about 2 inches there, and put a little upright bend on that. So I'm going to grip that really firmly and push the wire up and away, always in a 2D platform, as if you've got that trapped between two panes of glass. So what we would do then is add on a wrapped loop a little bit later. So I'm just going to snuggle this down until that's the right size for me to use today. Now the reason that I don't hang from the tip of the crescent, I put the loop further away, let me just flip that over so it's the neat side, is because you get a finer balance. If you hang too close to the tip, then your pendant will fall like so because of the weight distribution. So it's ideal to have that just away from the edge of the end, just up here. So what we're going to do is imagine the straight line comes down. We're going to go just a little bit further along so that our crescent shape reflects that shape that we're looking to create. So again, I'm pinching quite close to the end of those pliers there, and a very, very sharp bend all the way. Now you could use another form if you wanted to, but what I'm going to do is just very, very gently coerce that wire to come back around. Because we pre-warmed it, it's really ready to work for us. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a squeeze until that sits exactly where I want it to. And again, you can just use the heat of your body to generate the smoothness and warmth that we need. So I'm going to imagine that my pendant is hanging down in this orientation. So I want to reflect those little prongs that happen at the end of the crescent moon shape. I'm going to grip hold of that wire again and draw that back on itself. Now I've made a very, very sharp bend there before I open that up ever so slightly. And you can really make these how you want them. This one is kind of coming in on itself a little bit, whereas this one is slightly flatter, a bit more like a horseshoe. Now, when you've decided that you've got the shape that you require, you can modify that just a little bit by hand if you want to. We're going to work out where this short end of wire is going to start wrapping around. Now, I won't show you the wrapped loop segment because we've done that many, many times. But what I will show you is how to get these two sides to line up. If you start wrapping straight away, you'll end up with a slightly larger prong to that crescent moon shape than you actually want to reflect. So what I'm going to do is hold on to the shorter length of wire at the point where it crosses that upright, which will become our bail. I'm going to hold that really firmly, just making sure that's exactly where I want it to. And I'm going to push up until I get a 45-degree angle. Let me just open that up slightly rather. And from that 45-degree angle, I'm going to take a little bit of a distance, maybe 2 millimeters, and I'm then going to get that wire to go straight again, as if it's heading towards the 9 o'clock. So you've got a little upright, and then it's going on its merry way in a straight line. And again, I'm just putting a little bit of warmth into the wire here. And I'm going to take just a millimetre of that straight line and grip very, very firmly before I draw the wire over the top of the upright and start to squeeze that down so that it nestles really neatly around our upright, which we will perform a wrapped loop on later. And once you've got a really tight curve going on around there, you can grip hold of the form and bring that tail around and just wrap that up so that it heads towards the top of the segment that will turn into a wrapped loop. And you can just very, very small amounts, little by little, turn that until you get the shape that you desire. So if I imagine that this is the front I want to work to, I'll just flip it over. Using my flush cutters, trim away, giving myself a little bit of an excess there. And what that enables me to do is just draw that tail of wire around so that it sits flat and neatly against the back of our upright. Give that a bit of a squeeze and then rotate my flat facing pliers, these are bent chain nose pliers, in a circular motion just to smooth that end against the upright segment. Get that to sit as upright as I possibly can, and then have a look at that front. So that's the form that we've created in the crescent moon shape. If you wanted to make the 5-pointed star, this is based around the same tutorial that I did, which I'll just pop above on a little fly out link. If you want to learn how to make the star shape, I have the world's easiest technique for that. So just pop over for the 5-pointed star. And the wrapping works exactly the same, because by the time you've layered and layered and layered, you won't even see that there are wires crossing inside. It will just look like a really lovely wire outside margin, but you've actually made a 5-pointed star. So if you'd like to join me back at the board, I will show you now how to add on the wraps to form that chaos theory. So I think I'm going to work with the slightly larger moon that I prepared earlier, because I've already made a wrapped loop just there. And I've got another one here just to show you what it looks like with a double coil front and back. Now this one I've hammered very, very lightly with a nylon head hammer, and you get a slightly different effect. If you were to do that with a steel or bronze hammer, you'd get a really lovely, in fact, effect where you can tell that it's been hammered. But this is kind of the way to strengthen that frame, especially if you choose to use the 1mm 18 gauge wire to make your frame. You would perhaps like to strengthen that up a little bit. So this is the one that I'm going to work with, and I'm going to show you now how to add on the additional wire to create the chaos look. Now, rather than working in one great big long strand of wire, what I'm going to do is take off about 24 inches of the 0.6, which is 22 gauge wire, and I'm going to cut that in half. So I've got two approximately 12-inch lengths. If you want to work with longer lengths of wire, you absolutely can. It just gets a bit tricky to demonstrate with. So I'm just going to very gently smooth those. With our finer gauges of wire, we don't want to do too much to them before we use them, because we can make them brittle. So rather than starting all the way at one end, what I'm going to do is hold these two sections of wire very, very firmly between thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to generate some coils, and I need to keep the pressure on these to keep them flat and side by side. So I'm just going to start bringing that around like so, and I'm just making a little bit of a loop. Now those wires must always sit side by side. If they come apart, you can just get them to go back together. Once you've got your first loop, we can add that to the frame, and it doesn't really matter where you start or where you finish. You've got to start somewhere, so I'm going to start somewhere where it's easy. So I'm going to lay my finer twin tram lines of wire over the top of the frame, and I'm going to pinch that super firmly. This is the front that we're looking at now, and that is because it's neater. The cut edges are on the back of my wrapped loop, so this is the front I've decided. So I'm going to hold that very firmly against the frame, and this is why it benefits you to either use a heavier gauge of wire or to hammer the wire, make it stronger. And I'm going to wrap those two wires around the outside of the framework. I'm going to push that up inside the frame now and make sure that those two tram lines snuggle very closely together around that outer frame. Now that will create a little bit of a helix, but it's a double one, so they're two side by side chasing around. I'm going to draw that all the way around, so I've wrapped twice. Now just to bring very, very gently, tip of the pliers on the left of the frame wire and on the right with opposite sides of the coil that you're working on, and then very gently squeeze that down, and you've kind of locked that now. So I'm going to give that a bit of a squeeze just to make sure that part one is really secure. So what we're going to do is continue with the longer length of wire for the moment, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Now what I might do is just scooch this up to the top now. Take this all the way over the top of the frame wire, around the outside and up inside the frame, scooching back around to go underneath. So again, that's two little helixes of the finer gauge wire side by side. Give that a bit of a squeeze, like so. And you'll see that that's come into position already. Now this by itself doesn't look like much, but once you have used a good, I don't know, 10 maybe of these shorter lengths of double wire, that will start to build up. So across the back, I'm just going to do straight lines. And it doesn't matter where they go really. But if you want to make your life easier, you can just start on the larger spaces to begin with. So a straight line across the back, push the wire around the outside of the framework, all the way around once, and then twice across the front. Make sure that you're not deforming your shape that you've created for the outer framework. If you have, then you can undo that slightly. You can use your pliers as if they were reverse action pliers and just open that up slightly, and then draw those two wires neatly side by side back into position. Now it's called chaos because we're not trying to be super neat here. What we're trying to do is fill this space with as much metal as possible. So what you could do if you wanted to is a little circle, and I'm pinching those two tram lines really, really firmly to ensure they don't cross over in the wrong way. So I've done one loop, and I might, in that case, go in the opposite direction a little bit further down. So we've got almost like a figure of 8 with a distended section in the middle. And I'm just going to play with that until I'm happy with how that sits. Now, if this is all we were making, this would be a point of weakness, having all that wire just freely available. But we're going to cover that so many times with other coils and swirls that it doesn't matter. So you can be really arty. So I'm going to take the tail all the way around, exactly the same as on the other side, and bring it around. So we're going to do another straight lines on the back, push the section through, all the way around, and then back up to the top. Now once you start filling this in with the multiple layers, you can try to feed in and out of your other layers if you want to, but for me, this is about making chaos. So I'm just going to take this over the top, bend that around, and I'm going to partially obscure some of the earlier wire swoops that we made. Now that's looking a little bit unneat, So my only rule with this is that those 2 tram lines have to be super neat, even when they're doing racetrack circles like they are here. So once you start to get towards the end of your wire and you start running out of space, you're going to post the ends up so that they form all the way around that framework, and you may have to bring them one by one. And that is when it starts getting challenging, keeping those 2 tram lines side by side. So super pinch with your non-dominant hand, and then use your dominant hand to pull that through. Now you can see that that's slightly loose, so what we're going to do is just tighten that up until it sits exactly how we want it to. Now you can see the wire here isn't going to be enough to do a circuit and then go across the front, so I'm going to show you now how to finish off the wire. It's super easy, and then the process is just a case of repeating. So I'm going to take the tails of those wires over the top and around the frame, and I'm going to draw that so it's coming up and away from the frame before I give that a very gentle squeeze to make sure I'm happy with how neat that is. And then I'm going to trim away. You can see the wire has come over the top of my framework. And what we need to do now is tuck it so that it sits inside the frame. So if you look there, that's about 2 to 3 millimeters of excess wire on the end there. And what we're going to do is draw that around the frame. This is easier when there are less sections of wire. Once you start building up, it becomes slightly more difficult, which is why having bent chain nose pliers, especially the fine tipped ones, is a real boon. So I would thoroughly recommend those if you don't already have some. So it is just a case of doing the same thing many, many times. So basically you repeat the exact same process until you have filled your frame as much as you possibly can and you run out of access spaces. Now you can obviously add on gemstones if you want. I will be teaching my chaos bangle very, very soon on YouTube, and that will be a technique which is filled with beads as well. So we've got some choices here for you to work with shape-wise. Hearts are always popular. My last couple of tutorials have been all about the hearts. You've got that beautiful star, about which there is a solo video from, I think, Christmas 2019. There's the 5-pointed star technique. And then, of course, you can, this is just a jump ring connecting these 2 differently sized crescent moons. So I'm going to finish that one off. And then I'll just put some samples on the outro of the YouTube video. So I hope that you've enjoyed that. I love making these in raw copper because this is something that I made 3 or 4 days ago and already it started to darken. So you can, because there's no gemstone, so there's no risk, you can dip this in liver of sulphur to make it very, very dark if you want to, or you can just touch it, hang it in your kitchen. It'll darken pretty quickly. But I will come back and show you how to add gemstones to the chaos technique very, very soon. I want to thank you for being here with me today, and I look forward very much to seeing you in the near future. Bye for now.